Welcome to A Fresh Start with Dr. Bobby Mullins, Executive Director of A Fresh Start Ministries. At some time, we all need a fresh start. And each week on A Fresh Start TV program, you'll hear a relevant message straight from the Bible, providing examples and principles to show us how to start over again. Join us now for this edition of A Fresh Start as Dr. Mullins proclaims from the Word of God how to live the abundant life Jesus desires for all of us to experience.
I'm Bobby Mullins, and I want to welcome you to the premiere broadcast of A Fresh Start. A Fresh Start Ministries is a new ministry that the Lord led me recently to form, and we'll have more to say about our ministry later in the program. And each week on our program, you're going to hear a brief message that I'll preach. Sometimes I may have a special guest, and also you'll be hearing sometimes by videotape of a church where I've preached and we've recorded the message, and sometimes we'll use that on our broadcast. But music is a very important part of my life, important part of our family, and an important part of our ministry. And so on our first few broadcasts, we want to have a couple of songs each week for special music. Now, for our first song on the broadcast tonight, we're going to show you a song we sang Easter Sunday 2007. My daughters and I helped me, and next week you'll be able to meet my daughters on our broadcast. But it's a great song about the resurrection of Christ and about the hope and being able to have a fresh start in life, and that's what our program's all about. So join us now, this previously aired song that we sang together on Easter Sunday 2007 of A Resurrection Morn. There was quite a stir in Jerusalem. It was known most everywhere that Jesus had been crucified and his body buried there. His disciples with their fear and doubt had gathered to weep and mourn when Mary boldly announced to them, I have seen the Lord, and hope was reborn. On resurrection morn, where life was gone, new life had come, and hope was restored. So don't be afraid. God keeps the promises he's made. In the midst of your storm, remember hope was reborn on resurrection morn.
Some days I've spent in the graveyard where living is no life at all. I worry and fret, or I wonder and guess, but that doesn't change my thoughts. My mind moves to what I know to be true when my faith begins to fade. My God has the power to do anything, even raise me from the grave.
'Cause hope was reborn on resurrection morn, where life was gone, new life has come, and hope is restored. So don't be afraid. God keeps the promises he's made. In the midst of your storm, remember hope was reborn on resurrection morn. remember hope was reborn on resurrection morn. Well, I hope you enjoyed that special by my daughters. And in a future program, they're going to be here with me in the studio, and we'll be singing together. But you know, for this premiere broadcast of A Fresh Start, I began to think about, through the years, songs that have helped me when I needed to make a fresh start. I can remember right out of college, I traveled for 3 years across the country, and twice a week I was at a different college campus. But I got tired of the lifestyle of partying and all the things that I had to be a part of in that job. And I had a guitar that I carried with me, and I remember when I'd be in my hotel room on a Saturday, I would sing songs that could just help me get back on track in my life spiritually. And I imagine, of all the songs that I've sung through the years, this is probably the one that I've gone back to more than any other. It's a song that was originally recorded by Larry Gatlin and Chris Christopherson. Elvis even made a recording of it, and right before he died, Johnny Cash recorded this great song, and I think you'll understand why it's helped me, and I pray that it'll be a blessing to you tonight. Lord, help me. Lord, help me walk another mile, just one more mile. I'm tired of walking all alone. And Lord, help me smile another smile, just one more smile. I know I just can't make it on my own. I never thought I needed help before. I thought that I could get by myself. And now I know I just can't take it anymore. With a humbled heart on bended knees, I'm begging you please, Lord, help me. Come down from your golden throne to me, Lord, lowly me. I need to feel the touch of your tender hand. Remove the chains of darkness to let me see, Lord, let me see just where I fit into your master plan. Never thought I needed help before. Thought that I could get by myself. And now I know I just can't take it anymore. With a humbled heart on bended knees, I'm begging you please, Lord, help me. With a humbled heart on bended knees, I'm begging you please, Lord, help. Lord, help. Well, I want to welcome you to A Fresh Start. I already said something in the intro to the program tonight, but I want to share with you a little bit about how God has brought me to this point in my life. This is a little bit different setup for me. I've been used to preaching behind a pulpit in a church for 18 years, been in the ministry full-time for 28. But back about a year ago, God began to do something new and fresh in my life. And I'll tell you what, at 57 years of age, I never dreamed I would do what I did, but I had been pastor of a church in this area, and we previously had a program on called In Times Like These that was on WVLR for 5 years, almost 6 years. And I want to say to those of you who watched us on In Times Like These, I want to thank you that for the last 10 months or so, when I've been out in this area, people have come up to me and y'all call me Dr. Mullins. At my church, they would call me Brother Bobby, but people have come up to me and said how much they enjoyed the In Times Like These television program. And you begin to ask me then if I would be back on television, and I said, if the Lord wills it, we'll get back on television in time. And so where this is different from when I was in the pastorate, our church supported the program out of the funds that we received from tithes and offerings. So this is a faith ministry, and I formed a nonprofit corporation, a Fresh Start Ministries, and have a board of directors, and some people have already helped me out to the point that we've been able to begin this TV ministry. But if you feel led of the Lord, we would welcome your donations to our ministry, which are tax exempt, and you can send those to A Fresh Start Ministries, P.O. Box 32486, Knoxville, Tennessee 37930. And so we would appreciate any help that you could give us as we seek to take the gospel to the world around us through A Fresh Start Ministries. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that I was pastoring, and I was at a church that had just completed the best year as far as numbers go, as far as people being baptized and people joining our church. We had the highest giving to our church that we had had in the 6 years that I had been there. And then God began dealing with me. Some of you remember the prayer of Jabez. Well, it talks in there about an enlargement. And God began to share with me that He was going to enlarge the sphere of my ministry. So I began to pray about that. I shared with some of our church leaders where I was pastor about what God had laid upon my heart. And I said, I don't know, it may be that the sphere of ministry can enlarge while I'm pastor here, but God may be leading me beyond the pastorate of the church. And after prayer, I did something pretty awkward. I call it a lean not into your own understanding faith moment. I felt led that God wanted to enlarge the sphere of our ministry beyond being the pastor of a local church, and so I resigned my full-time position. People call that an oxymoron. Most people leave churches when things aren't going well, and things have been going very well for us. Somebody said, well, maybe telling me when I decided to resign my pastorate, they said that oxymoron, maybe you ought to take the OXY out of the front of it. And I know what they mean, because it was a very unusual thing to do. But you know, these last few months I've made a fresh start. I'm 58 years old now, and believe me, I've started fresh, and really we basically started all over again as far as ministry. But it's been an exciting time in our life. I'm journaling. I don't journal a whole lot, but I'm journaling ways that God has taken care of us in special ways to help meet our needs while I don't have the salary of a pastorate, and God's blessing us. But I've had a heart to be able to minister beyond, for the most part, to people of a local church congregation, and through this ministry, we know we're going to be able to minister to people all over East Tennessee. And I want you to know that you feel free, if there's something I could do to help you, there's some spiritual question you have, we'll have it up on our screen throughout our programs, how you can reach us at A Fresh Start Ministries. But I want to be a pastor, a television pastor, who you may never meet, but I want you to have the opportunity to meet me, if that would be something that you would need to do. So if you're a pastor of a church or in the area, we'd be happy to come to your church on a Sunday for a Fresh Start Sunday emphasis or some other way that you could use us. But as I began thinking about a fresh start and how you start out small in a ministry like ours, I began to think about the story of Gideon in the Bible. A lot of people think about Gideon's fleece. Well, I'm not going to talk about Gideon's fleece tonight, how he threw out a fleece to God and asked God for a sign. By the way, I believe God will do that. And sometimes God will use a fleece as we throw out and ask God to give us a sign of some type. That's the way that God will sometimes direct us. It helps us increase in our faith. But there are some times, just based off the Scriptures, God gives us enough in His Word that we don't really need any new revelation. We really need to get in and look at the revelation that God has had. And I found that through my life, God will direct my path through certain Scriptures that they almost make my heart pound out of my body when I read them. I know it's God speaking to me. And God uses various ways in which He speaks to us. But I'm just sharing with you tonight some of the ways that God had used that with me. And I began to think about Gideon. 300 warriors. When it started out in the Bible, it says over in the 6th chapter of Judges that God came to Gideon, and He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Well, if you know anything about Gideon, that was kind of awkward, because Gideon later said, "Lord, I'm the least. Our family is the least of all of the people in our nation. And why are you choosing me?" Well, there's a principle we'll get to in just a moment on that. But the Lord said to Gideon, "The Lord is with you, thou mighty warrior." So what he did, he then asked Gideon to fight the Midianites, the Amalekites. They were the ones who were causing persecution to the nation of Israel and had really caused the nation of Israel to go down so much that they could not stand against that army. But they began to cry out to God. God heard what they were saying, and God answered and provided a deliverer for them. And so when it started out, there were about 32,000 Israelites who were going to fight the Midianites. But you know what it says in chapter 7 and verse 12? It says there, chapter 6 verse 12, it says there that in the Midianite camp, that it was as if they were sand on the seashore. You couldn't even count the number of camels that they had. It was so spread out, the number of people, that the Israelites, 32,000 Israelites and countless numbers that they were to go against. But you know what God said to Gideon? He said, the 32,000 are too many. And so I need to fight with less people. God wanted to get the credit for it, so He said, 32,000 is too many. So He said to them, then if we've got too many and you're scared and you don't want to fight against the countless number of Midianites, He said you could go home and 22,000 left. So God said there's still too many. So He devised a way whereby He would separate the people and get down to the total number of warriors that He wanted. And so He said, whoever goes up to the river to get a drink of water, first of all, separate those who will bend down and drink the water like a dog would drink it from those who will bend down and scoop it up with their hands. Well, you know how many did that, scooped it up with their hands? 300. The Lord said, that's going to be the number that's going to fight the countless number of Midianites. Whew, I don't know. That's 300 against those countless numbers. But as the story goes, Gideon then gave them a jar, and he gave them a torch, and he gave them trumpets. And they surrounded the Midianite camp. And before the time happened where they were surrounding them in the night, and all of a sudden they blew those trumpets, and it doesn't matter, thousands and thousands below in the valley with 300 trumpets surrounding them, it must have sounded like 300,000 trumpets. They broke the glass, and it made them think that fighting was going on among them, and they saw those torches coming down. The Midianites scattered, and God gave Gideon a great victory with only 300 warriors. Wow. Little is much when God is in it. And in thinking about our ministry, I like to watch television preachers, and I've watched quite a few through the years. I've seen some men start out kind of small, and now they have worldwide ministries. God gives you a heart for a certain place at a certain time. I'm a native of Memphis, Tennessee. Many years of my ministry were spent there as an associate minister and then later as a pastor. But I came to college at the University of Tennessee and fell in love with the greater Knoxville area and the Smoky Mountains. And God has given me a heart for East Tennessee. I remember when I was pastoring my previous church and wanted to begin a television ministry. They had a national ministry at one time and had a couple of splits at the church, and hundreds of people had left, but they had a state-of-the-art television studio. And that's how I came in contact with WVLR, and we met over what we could do in the way of a television ministry. And I know that WVLR has times where they raise funds. I want to tell you, you couldn't give to a better television network or studio than WVLR. For a fraction of the cost, we were able to get on television and have the same viewing range as if we were on one of the major networks there in the Knoxville area. Little is much when God is in it. And God can take what little you have and He can multiply it in ways that you would never have dreamed possible. Well, let me just share with you about 3 or 4 principles that we learn from the story of Gideon that can help you maybe as you begin a fresh start. Because maybe things have not gone well in your life, or you've lost your job. You may have had a 6-figure job and you're down to nothing right now. Things have not gone your way. You've had problems with your children, who knows, and you just feel like, Lord, there's just not much that I can do for you right now. Well, think about Gideon. First of all, Gideon had said that God called him mighty man of valor. And he was the one who said, Lord, I'm the least. Well, what's the principle we learn from that? Sometimes the most impressive does not make the mightiest impact. I can think through the years, times when people who I've seen in ministry, and you thought, man, they're going to have a worldwide ministry. They didn't. But then God will use someone who may not be as gifted as some of these others, and will use them in a way that they just are faithful to serve God where they are. And as they serve God where they are, then He enlarges the sphere of their ministry. David, when it came time to choose a successor to Saul, David had several brothers, and as they came before the priest to see who would be the next king, he thought, well, surely this is the one. God said, no, it's not that one. Are there any other brothers? And they said, yes, his young son David, a very ruddy young man. Wasn't the most impressive of his brothers. But God doesn't look at the outward appearance like man. God looks at the heart. And David was the one then, the least impressive of all his brothers at the time that God chose to lead Israel. So the most impressive does not always make the mightiest impact. A second principle, the most numbers mean nothing to God. Do you remember countless number of Midianites, but God said the 32,000 Israelites are too many. So God had His way of separating the ones that He wanted, and when it got down to 300, God said, this is the number. So the most numbers mean nothing to God. Little is much when God is in it. So with 300 warriors then, Gideon was able to lead them to a victory, and a great victory that God gave them. A third principle, the biggest is not always the best. Now, you know, it doesn't tell us anything about the men who lapped that water with their hands. Some people believe that showed men who were pretty good warriors, because if you had bent down and gotten the water, you wouldn't be able to see ahead of you, and there could be the enemy on the other side, and one of them could shoot you with an arrow. But as you would bend down and lap the water, you could be alert to what was happening around you. And perhaps, it doesn't say so in the Bible, but perhaps that's one of the qualities those men had that would make them good warriors. And even though there were 300 of them, they weren't scared of the thousands they were to face. So it was with those 300 men that God was able to have a victory. The biggest is not always the best. Didn't David defeat the giant Goliath with 3 stones, 5, or just 1 stone actually? And then a fourth principle. We've said that the most impressive does not always make the mightiest impact. The most numbers mean nothing to God. The biggest is not always the best, but a fourth principle we learn from Gideon is that God doesn't always ask for your ability as much as He asks for your availability. You may not think, God, I don't have a lot to offer. Well, if God calls you to do it, I know this. He'll equip you and enable you with whatever you need to fulfill God's will. I recently heard a well-known television minister saying that he was praying for 1,000 people to give $1,000 a year extra. Wow, what faith. And I bet he'll get it. But right now I was just thinking, God, as we start out small, what's something that would be reasonable to ask that can make a great impact? And my seminary did this. We call it Gideon's 300. 300 people give $300. You can do the math. That's not a great figure. It's sacrificial for some. But just thinking, we called it Gideon's 300. 300 people will give $300 to a ministry. As we come to the close of this program tonight, this is the premier broadcast of A Fresh Start. And if you're able to help us in our ministry, I said at the beginning of our message tonight, we could use your help. If you could be a part of Gideon's 300 who would give $300 to help us get our ministry off the ground, we'd be so thankful to you. But any gift that you could give, I promise you, it's going to be used to further the Lord's work, to help this television ministry to be able to continue. And so we'll have there on the screen how you can reach us. But it's A Fresh Start Ministries, P.O. Box 32486, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37930. And so I pray that if you could help us, God bless you. And until our next program, it's been a joy to be with you tonight. And so until we meet again, I hope you can say with me, thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.